Might
Okay,
have it.
I got it. There we go. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming to this month's edition of the Seattle Crafter Meetup. We're meeting on the third Thursday of the month because we're in November, and in the States, November, December is complicated for the fourth Thursday of the month, so we do it on the third Thursday. Also, what we do on these months is we give myself and Paige, the co-host of the channel, time to talk about things that we would like. And so that's why I'm talking here today. For the Seattle Software Crafters, we're a regular meetup. We get together and we used to meet in person, but since COVID, we've been doing it virtually. And actually, for this year, we've started to record and post them on a YouTube channel. So a lot of the talks are posted on YouTube. Most of them are. And what we did is we found that we got a bigger, wider audience. We don't get the pizza and drinks that we used to, but we get interesting voices that expand throughout the world. We get European, we have some folks from India. I don't see any of the regulars quite yet from off the continent. And we get together and we talk about things that aren't language or technology specific. What we talk about is how to get better at our craft, and our craft being writing code, and how we can do it better, how we can do it more sustainably. Sometimes we talk about teaming. We just had a discussion about ensemble or teaming or mob programming. And those are our bread and butters. Talking about topics like that, how we can get better at writing code, how we can better writing code faster, more effectively, funner, more sustainably, higher quality. All of those things fall within that bucket. And specifically today, I'm going to talk about some things, the next simplest things you can do to get better at coding. Now, I am not saying that these things will make everyone better and faster. I'm taking a book out of Fred George's, or taking a book out of Fred George's page. No, taking a page out of Fred George's book, where he's a disruptor. And so I will take some ideas and I will sort of poke at them and twist them. And I would say that some of the things, if not all the things I'm going to talk about today, are going to be controversial and maybe make you a little uncomfortable. This is the thing that I want you to think about is there value in there, and how can you maybe turn the dial up a little and challenge yourself and maybe find some value in it? Because I've found value in almost everything that I'm going to talk about in here today. And I have to click right here. Today I will be using Slido for some things. So if you go to slido.com and enter in 6327240, I have to make sure that I have Slido turned on, by the way. It is turned on, I believe. And if you go to slido.com, enter in that number, you can go ahead and be contributing in some of those pages. At the same time, if you want to use your mobile device, you can take a picture of the QR code. I'm going to go on to the next slide. There are more pictures of this, so you will have time as I talk through this. And again, now I have to come back over here. I have to go like this. Okay. First and foremost, Agile Open Northwest. I'm on the board. Paige is the one of the organizers for this year. We'll be in person this year, March 20th, not this year, next year, March 22nd through 24th. Tickets are available now. Really love to see everyone here there. Agile Open Northwest is not about process, not only about process. We have a very strong technical presence, and we have coding sessions that go way into the night. It's awesome. So be there. So I'm talking today about keeping things simple. And when I think about simple, this acronym comes into play. I'm sure most of us know it. Keep it simple, stupid. This is one of the things, a number of people here have written code with me. I think about this a lot. And I mention it, how can I do it simpler? The next acronym that I think about with simplicity is YAGNI. We had Chet Henriksen here and got some information, some history behind Yagni the in the agile world, in that it was sort of introduced by the C3 team working at Chrysler, the original XP team that sort of promoted things. And Chet would keep going up, I think it was Kent Beck, and ask Kent, hey, what about this? Should we add this, this, and this because we're going to need this? And Kent would always say to him, you ain't going to need it. And so, Yagni is another one of those things. And, I believe, Cody, in our recent project, I heard you using it quite a bit as well, too, which was awesome. So, Yagni. Now, the first poll of the day, which I see some people have been adding some things in there. What are some simple things that you can do to code better? And I'm seeing some things in there. Practice. Say no, write less code. Let me go ahead and move this over into here. Right here. I haven't found a good way to show this and integrate this in, so I'm trying to just play with it a little bit. Practice. Being fast. Say no, write less code. Step away from the code. Practice, slow down. Pair. Ensemble, collaborative programming. Say no. That's a big one. That is a big one and a powerful one, to say, hold on, no, we don't have to do that. Write less code. I say it very frequently. The best line of code that I can write is the code I don't. Read the compiler output. Someone there has worked with me because I'm notorious for not reading the compiler output. I see Paige put in their ask why in chat. It's great. A lot of good stuff there. Okay. Those are all great things. And I'm going to take breaks. Oh, take breaks, actually, I'm going to mention very much. Pomodoro timer, I am a huge, huge fan of. It's very important for me, and very much so. Yeah. So a lot of good things there. A lot of good things right there. So simple code. This is where I'm going to come in. I'm actually going to stop that poll really quick. There. Awesome. Simple code. This is one of the first things that I can talk about that will help you write better code, is write simple code. Now, again, go there. What is simple code? How do we define simple code? To me, simple code is sort of single responsibility method. It's a method that does one thing. I'm a fan of writing code in a small object-oriented code in a small talk object-oriented way. It's not uncommon for my code, my method lengths to be between 1 and 2 lines for a whole project. I fall back on 5 lines is a pretty big method for me. How can I make it smaller? I realize that for some folks here, that might be a very uncomfortable thing, and folks might think that, small to me is a method that's 20 or 50 lines, or it fits on one screen size. That's okay. I used to be in that boat too, and I started to turn that knob and, again, get uncomfortable a little and find out, how could I make it smaller and smaller? Thankfully, I took a Fred George object-oriented boot camp, which I cannot emphasize more. If you ever get an opportunity to do that, take that. It's worth its weight in gold. And I started to cut my methods down to under 5 lines of code. A lot of times, like I say, 1 to 2 lines of code. So that to me is simple code. And simple code is not complex, or you don't look at it and go, wow, that's clever. If I write clever, I'm like, that's a bad thing for me. I like to be able to look at it and know very easily what it does. So let me ask, what's wrong with writing simple code? Does anyone have any thoughts on what might be wrong with writing simple code? You can take yourself off mute really quick.
It's too hard.
Simple is not easy. Yes, It's hard. A lot
The
of
Chicky
times,
has that whole presentation. Simple is hard.
yeah. Well, and a lot of times, as we get more experienced and as we accumulate different titles that have different meanings, a lot of times we want to think that, I'm a principal developer. I shouldn't write this simple code because it's too simple. I should write code that makes people think. Well, that's not necessarily the right way to think about it. But I want to point out right here that reading code is not the same as reading a book. And there are a number of studies. I put one down here, an MIT study, that to the brain, reading computer code is not the same as reading language. When you do scans of a brain, of someone reading fiction or even nonfiction, small parts of the brain light up. Now, between fiction or nonfiction, different parts light up, but it's only some bits and pieces here and there. If you take a CAT scan of someone reading code, the brain is lit up like a Christmas tree. It's firing all over the place. It's using all different centers of the brain, primitive and higher functioning. It's not the same. It takes actually quite a bit of work for us to do. Now, G-Paw Hill also then talks about some things and has me asking this question: what do we spend a majority of our coding time doing? And I had to add other than in meetings. We spend a vast majority of our time as programmers scanning code. What we're doing is we're going through and we're looking at code and we're looking for a specific place in the code to either fix a bug, to insert a new feature, to modify something. And so a lot of it is us going through an IDE or a text editor to find that right bit of code that we need to go. And a lot of times we're just looking for key parts or we're tracing down usages of things to find out where it is, especially when we're optimizing code. One of the things that we did in the last project towards the end was quite a bit. And it's that scanning that we spend a vast majority of our time doing. And simple code is actually really easy to scan. So my other part here is your programmer brain can deceive you. Don't trust it. And with that is if you're writing simple code, you're less likely to have your programmer, or sometimes I say my monkey brain, deceive me into making something more complex or making more calls or going beyond the bounds of single responsibility. So the simpler the code I write, the less likely my programmer brain is going to deceive me or lead me astray. Now, we're developers. Most of us here are developers. And one of the things that I like to do is write code and look at code. And so here are some code examples. I'm definitely not brave enough to write code on the fly. I've learned that lesson before. Here is something that extracted from a project that is disable tip button. And it's one line. It's pretty simple. It's got only a handful of evaluations. Not selected payment tippable, and is tipping gift card enabled, not gift card tipping enabled, or current ticket refund. 3 things, few evaluations. Something that we discovered when we were working on this code, Cody, you and I, and maybe Garrick, is there was a bug in this simple code when we discovered it. And we ended up refactoring it just a little bit to this. If the current ticket is a refund, return true. If it's a gift card and tipping is enabled on a gift card, return true. Otherwise, selected payment is not tippable. Return that value. Relatively simple. It actually is more lines of code, same number, well, one added evaluation in there. And I see Ted in there. The first one is not simple. It can't handle so many, I can't handle so many Boolean operators. Exactly. And one of the interesting things, and I hear Kent Beck talking about it, is the older folks get, the smaller their stack is. I'm paraphrasing. And I can only keep so many operations in my head before things start popping off the stack. And when I'm writing simple code, like the lower portion, I can say, if it's a refund, true, and it pops off the stack. If it's gift card, okay, I'm seeing gift cards. I might extract that into a method that actually tells me a little bit more about it. Return true. Otherwise, return is not tippable. And again, note, one of the subtleties about that is the top line I have, not selected payment is tippable. It's very easy in there to miss that bang at the front or to overlook it. But in the bottom one, you're reading through selected payment is not tippable. You're engaging a different part of the brain that's reading more of the literature, and you're going, oh, that's that. Now your brain isn't cross-matching and using up a whole bunch of stuff. So it's good. Simple code. Now here, pennies, enable button ternary. So this is about ternaries. And ternaries, I certainly know some of the people here, ternaries are easy to understand. I can understand ternaries. All of us as programmers can. However, I throw out there that ternary requires extra brain power, that limited stack in my head. I have to come in and go, oh, it's ticket amount null equals new pennies, okay, versus that. And I have to keep that on my stack when I then go back and look at where this is being used. And it's just a little bit more use of my brain power, but is there an easier way that I can make it so that I don't have to worry about that and use that extra energy? So here I've got pennies, enable button returns. If ticket amount null, return a new pennies. Or a no pennies, sorry. A new no pennies. Otherwise, return ticket amount. I have a lot less to think about. And if I'm scanning through code, boom, I can go here, this does that. Okay, I'm out. Whereas if I've got the ternary, I have to think about it just a little bit more. Now let's get into something a little more complex. I gave you some very simple ones. Those were production code. Here's something a little more complex. We've got an if. Basically, we've got some ifs. We've got a switch case. We're doing early returns, which is good. However, we've got this nesting in here, which makes it a lot more complicated than it necessarily needs to be. A quick refactor puts it as this. If you're not handheld, or even we had a method and I wasn't able to capture the final code that said, if tablet, return this view. Otherwise, if you're a payment flow, if you're not a payment flow, return this view. Then finally at the bottom, or in the middle there, the bottom of that first method, go into that switch case, which is going to return more. I believe in the end, we actually refactored all of this just to be a bunch of early returns that would return the views, the screens that were supposed to be displayed. So again, a little bit of simplicity, a little bit of complexity diminished as we go in it. Now for one of my more controversial things, if I wasn't controversial enough, else. Fred George beat it into our head. Else statements, all else statements are evil and should be removed from code. Controversial, freely admit. However, you can minimize them relatively easy. There are times when you sort of need them, but if you look at the usage, then maybe you don't need them and you extract a method. That's another thing. So in here, we've got if, else, and an if. We've got a couple different things that are happening. One thing that's sort of not happening, if sync exists, we're not doing anything. Else, we're doing other things. The important things are in there. I'm really glad Cody's saying kill if state or kill else statements. That seems like a win to me. However, if we refactor this, we say if customer display sync exists, just return. Get out of here. That's a guard clause. We're getting out of there. If you're handheld, tidy this a little bit, then finally go into thank you or navigate if fully paid. So slightly different. Got early return, a guard clause, an official guard clause there, and then we're going in there. Now, this brings up an interesting point that that I hear very frequently coming into organizations, helping coaching, things like that, is, well, I heard that you should only ever return once from a method. And I'm here to say, I've heard that too. I learned that very early on. One of the best things you can do is only have one return in a method. And that's what, that is a very good thing for programmers to learn when they're starting out. It helps keep track of different things. However, as you learn, evolve, get more comfortable, and learn new techniques and new processes, it's okay to stop doing that. And one of those things is a guard clause. And that's the simplest implementation that helps you break out of that. And a guard clause is just something to come in a lot of times, and why it would be called that is a validation clause. If you're this, then don't do anything and get out of here. Now, some of the other code, it actually has what I call early returns, where it's doing something and then an early return. And those are okay too. Again, it's layers of learning. As you add more tools into your quiver of arrows, you can start using them differently. So very frequently, in order to really empower or enhance simple code, early returns, which encompass guard clauses and doing some work and then exiting out, are key, as you can see here. Here's another one. This one's really simple. If you're handheld, set this value, else navigate to fully paid. Now, it's sort of not single responsibility because it's setting a value or it's navigating. That's not going to go there yet. But you can come in and go, if you're handheld, set the value and get out. Again, the early return. Otherwise, navigate if fully paid. And you're good. So right here is one of the reasons why I say else statements are bad. This is taking else to the not to the extreme. All of the code that I've shown you today, even the ones that I sort of mocked up and had rewritten, are examples of production code that I've found across code bases scattered across the world now, actually. And right here, we've got a if else, if else. And if you put an if and an else in there, someone's probably going to put another if in there, in either your if or your else, and then maybe an else, and your cyclomatic complexity starts to skyrocket very, very quickly. And even in here, we've got scheduled status dot invalid two different ways. I believe we eventually refactored this, having that be early and reducing the amount of code. So just one example of why I think else statements are primarily evil and should be killed. So let's go into the next Slido poll here. What's something that you can do today to start coding simpler? I'll bring this on over. Getting rid of nulls absolutely does help. And Ted, the no pennies right there was a prime example of the null object pattern in place. Because as we all know, we do not want to be throwing around a null when money's on the line. People get picky about that. Set it as a goal is a good one. This. Yeah, we got Slido done. I don't know where to put it. I'm putting it over there. I'm hoping folks have it all set up already. If you don't, let me know. And of course, subtle underlying theme, do or do not. There is no try. This too is one of those things that I like to try and practice as much as I can. Experiment with constraints, kata practice, single responsibility is good. No, that there. experiment with constraints, set as a goal, practice single responsibility, limit number of lines and methods, how to practice. You know, setting warnings on number of lines of code is good. I can remember working with Quinn Gill on a project and creating a mobile app for a Washington State insurance company that showed claims and stuff. And after we were done, and it was relatively complex code, running some metrics on it, and our average method length was 1.2 lines per method for the whole app. And on top of that, it was 1.7 lines per class. That was using Fred, that was after Fred George's class, and us having really focused on in what Quinn really calls micro objects. Very modular. We did a bunch of work. Oh. So that was my phone. All right. So good stuff in there. Good stuff. The next line, the next step here is going to be simple naming. Now, what's simple naming? And for this, one of the biggest things for me, hold on, let me make sure that I'm storing things in ways that I can find them again, is based off of Arlo's 7 stages of naming, Arlo Belshie's 7 stages of naming. And it was either Jay Bazuzzi, or Llewellyn Falco that introduced me to this. And this right here could take a whole talk in and of itself, and does. And I'm going to focus primarily on missing, nonsense, and honest, the first 3 stages, and really not focus much on honest at all. I'm staying in missing and nonsense in here. And if you haven't seen it or seen more about it, do an internet search for Arlo Belshie's 7 stages of naming. He's got talks. He's got all sorts of things on it. It's really good. It's one of the things that's helped me in my programming very much. But I'm talking about nonsense naming here. So why nonsense naming? Well, I've found that I spend not an inordinate amount of time, but I do pause and I think about naming. It's like, oh, what am I going to name this? Even if I know what this is going to do. It's a small method. I'm writing a test. I'm doing something. I know what it's going to do. I will put something in. And because I believe in ruthless refactoring, I almost always come back and either rename the test and or rename the method or variable or whatever it is. So a lot of times I've actually defaulted just using nonsense naming and going with it, and then at the end working with it. So this right here are some examples of, I'm sitting at a method name with the cursor blinking going, oh, what's this method name? Or the class name, I need to put in a class name, or more commonly, frequently, because I'm test driven, is down there at the bottom. Oh, what is this test? It should, and I will pause from anywhere from 5 to 30 seconds and come up with a name. However, if I don't, I can avoid some things. Number one, in here, the death of 1,000 cuts. If you're pausing for 30 seconds, every time you're anywhere from 5 to 30 seconds, every time you're naming a test, you're naming a class, you're naming a variable, that's a lot of time. Now, it does give us pause and lets us think through things, but a lot of times I've found just putting in a nonsense name lets me dive in and help work with it. I'm going to throw in Yagni here because in here, I come in and I think, oh, am I going to need this? And all of a sudden, my programmer brain has a chance to sneak in, my monkey brain, and distract me with, oh, you're going to need this, you're going to need this. And so this is going to be this, which comes up to this point here. We will discover the name once we've done the work. And a lot of times, because I believe in ruthless refactoring and I'm trying to optimize hands-on keyboard typing code, I like to just throw something in. I'm going to refactor it later. Once it's there, I will know what it is. I will discover it there. And then additionally, on top of that, is you can name something and force it to be implemented that way when it maybe isn't the right way to be implemented. So it's a naming bias. And if you put in a nonsense name, you're less likely for your programmer brain to lead you astray and maybe make you do some things that you didn't need to do. Which comes back, and I see some things in chat here. What to our final poll for today, in what nonsense word might you use to delay your naming? And I've got some in here as the poll starts. Blah. I used to use blah, and I really wish Mark Fay were here today because he comments all the time that I'm using blah. And that's what I used to do for my variable name. I put blah, and then or for my test name, I put sometimes should blah, and then variable blah, and then method blah. But you can only have so many blahs before you have to go blah blah, and then you've got blah blah, and then you've got blah blah blah, and you get naming conflicts. And blah, it's like, was I doing one blah, two blah? I don't remember that. Then Llewellyn Falco came around and introduced me to applesauce. And I liked applesauce. I like applesauce too. And I started using that, and you go applesauce. Okay. Oh, I need another one. Okay. Peach sauce, pear sauce, hollandaise sauce, and Bernaise. Wait, now how do you spell Bernaise? You start playing around with that, and it starts growing and growing. And applesauce is a lot of typing. It's a lot of words in there. Enter Amber at IL, and she said, I like to use pants. And so I started using pants, and I like pants now. Because, you got pants. Okay, I need another one. Socks, jacket, shirt. Oh, I can think of that. Oh, drawer, hanger, things can. Okay, trousers. I see that, Matt. Pantaloons. So yes, but it's shorter. Now, one of the things that blah got me is there aren't a lot of words that match with blah, or word parts that match with blah. Pants, there are some. So yeah, there's some complication there. Now, the final one, you see a duck. Well, duck is sort of the polite and public term that I can use for it. I'm sure you can figure out what I mean by duck this code. A lot of times people will put some profanity in, and you can use all sorts of different ones. My roots for programming come from the game industry, and specifically the children's game industry. And if you were found checking in code, even if it didn't make production, with profanity, that was a fireable offense. Because in kids' games, you don't want profanity accidentally sneaking in. And so I have an internal reaction to it where I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that quite like that. But hey, you do you. Whatever works for you, great. Just think about delaying your naming. And so now I'm going to come in, I'm going to take this poll in here. And we have some names in here. We've got controller provider, foobar, Quicks, foobar backs, applesauce, foobar, test C, hi mom, Z, pony. I could see going with some animals. Yeah. To do can be a little complicated sometimes because, well, it does show up in a to-do list. To do triggers some people, Cody. Yeah. Underscores are good, but it's hard searching for underscores. And having an anchor of some sort of name that has a meaning can help with that. And then foo, and then rename me works. It's a lot of typing. So yeah, thank you for playing those. All good suggestions, all excellent. All right, now the final thing I call the simplest thing, and this by far is not the simplest thing. This is one of the hardest things to keep code simple, is finding What is the simplest thing you can do first? This is very easily the hardest thing of the things that I've been talking about. Because when you talk to someone about, well, what is the simplest thing we can do? What do you mean? You know, are you talking about getting something in front of the customer or whoever's consuming this? Are you talking about, the simplest, dumbest thing? And frequently I say, what's the simplest, dumbest thing that we can get into production that we can start getting feedback from? But that's really wordy. It's a lot of words. And that's sort of one of the core agile ideas and beliefs is that let's get something in front of someone that's going to be using it so we can start getting feedback. Here's where your programmer brain really comes out and distracts you, saying, well, we could do this, we could do this, trying to figure out how to cut it, because you want, and I'm going to use some very weighted terms here, you want horizontal slice all the way through, or a vertical slice, depending on how your orientation of your map is. You want something that cuts through everything so that you can start getting feedback and growing and evolving something. Rather than saying, oh, we need all these components. But so, okay, I'm going to come up with this. Here's a problem to practice. Give it an int number between 1 and 100, return the string of that int unless it's a 3, 5, or multiple of the two. Folks that know me, how can I not work FizzBuzz into this, right? I'm Mr. FizzBuzz. So this is a very simple problem, and it's FizzBuzz. Folks that know me say the simplest possible thing is to start off, for me, write a test, given the int 1, return the string 1. And then start evolving the problem from there. I then go in and I start triangulating 1 and then 2, maybe 2. If you're using acceptance tests, or if you're doing acceptance test-driven development, you can start playing around with it slightly different. However, this is trying to cut it through with how can you get that one simple thing that you can start evolving. A lot of times when I'm talking with developers, giving them during an interview, they want to start with mod 3. They want to start with mod 15 or 3 and 5. And that's the programmer brain diving in, going, hey, let's do something more complex. So it takes time and practice to get to the simplest thing. Now, I'm currently unemployed. I got laid off a couple weeks ago, so I am looking for a job. Anyone that wants to hire me, please do. Or talk with me later. Here, there was a company I'm interviewing with that had a problem that started off very much like this. Create either a console or a UI app that displays photo IDs and titles in an album. Now, what's the simplest possible here? And this is what I started to think about. What would be the simplest possible? Am I going to do Chicago style, Chicago Detroit style, which is inside out? Am I going to go London style, outside in? Where is the seam that I can wire in? So I started with a library, a code library, and it would just return the formatted string of a photo. Given any integer, it would just return something. Very simple, dumb. That was my first test. I then triangulated and started iterating on that and moving it. I actually went down into doing a photo all the way through, of getting it from the JSON, parsing it out, those things. And then I wrapped a console app on top of it. So I did a little bit of a combination of Chicago style and London style for playing with it. But again, trying to get that one little bit so I can start getting feedback. The reason why I started with the library code was I didn't want to parse the 5,000 photo JSON file manually and figure out all these things. So I leveraged as much of the code that I could do to do that for me. And I built on that. So again, simplest possible for me, start with a library that returns one hard-coded photo format and then extend it. Now, those are great examples. The second one's a little bit more of a real world example, but this right here, I'm sure almost everyone here has been asked to do something like this some point in time. This is very generalized. Create an API that parses a JSON payload, calculates the differences, updates the database, and returns the status. Something that happened to it. So what's the simplest possible here? If you're going to start off with needing to, hopefully it's a greenfield, what's the simplest possible? To me, and I've done this, I've now taken this approach now about 5 times in projects in the recent years. The first thing I do is just a simple hello world API that I can get and deploy into whatever dev environment there is. And it could even go to production, because hello world, who cares? Who cares? It says hello world, security. Okay, I understand, but that can be layered on later. We got an API that says hello world. That's not company secrets. And then from there, you can say, oh, well, what about, we're going to be getting a JSON payload. That sounds like a data contract, and it's probably coming from another group. Unfortunately, we're still segregated in our different groups. Now we can put in a test that validates that data contract, or even just says, you know what, make sure that all the keys are there and none of the keys have changed. So now you can do that. And then on top of that, you can start maybe hitting some other or sending out your data to whomever else. And you can start fleshing that out one little bit at a time, which is more like London style, outside in. James Shore has some really good videos on how to do this. And I think that might have been one of the original inspirations on me trying and playing with it this way. But I say it's still not easy. My programmer brain takes control and says, we want to think about this. So yeah, it is what it is. But regardless of that, the whole thing about what's the simplest possible thing I can do to get this in front of someone takes practice. And I have had, I think last year or the year before, we had a session on that where all we did was practice code katas and that first intro step as to how to cut it down and make it smaller and smaller. Now, right here, simple start practice. Now, not only was I able to work in FizzBuzz in here, as folks that know me, I am Mr. Deliberate Practice as well too, right? So here is, if I were breaking this down into deliberate practice, I would, number one, set my mindset so that I'm practicing simple starts. That is my focus, my primary focus. Pick a code kata, either from codekata.com, Code Wars, Advent of Code, Coding Dojo, whatever. Code katas are easy to find. Think about, but not too long, what the simplest thing is to start, because the key is not focus on trying to get the optimal thing. Just get something and try it. See how it feels. Pause and ask yourself, is there something simpler? And try and keep cutting and cutting and cutting until you get something simple, 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 until you think, can't be any simpler than that. And then try and cut a little more and try it out. Implement just a little bit of it. You don't, here's the programmer brain sneaking in saying, I gotta finish this code kata. No, you don't. That's not what you're practicing. You're practicing simple starts. So all you need to do is start and get enough feedback to know, was that the right path? You will know it sooner rather than later. And then you pick another kata and do the same thing. That's the deliberate practice there. Now, I would be remiss to say that, this is me. This is my bread and butter. This is deliberate practice. This is what I do with teams all the time. I do it for companies, with companies. I've been known to do it on the side as well too. So I am available, have a lot of extra time. This is a shameless promo plug. You can email me, reach out. I can be there. And not just for simple start practice. I'm all sorts of practices. This framework works all over the place. So to quick summarize, some simple things to keep simple. Simple code, early returns, multiple returns, no else statements, small methods. Again, I didn't say that I preface this whole thing by saying some of this is going to be controversial and might make you feel uncomfortable, a little queasy, with funny in the dummy. But coding this way sets my brain free and sets a lot of folks free that I've worked with on this. Then delayed naming, pants. Thank you, Amber. Appreciate it. And then simplest possible. What's the simplest possible thing that I can do to get in front of an end user? If you can't tell, I've said that a lot. I keep evolving it too. And then here, thank you for coming. I'm Steve Quo. My email, quoman@gmail.com. We're not done though. On December 21st, Paige Watson will be talking about making your teams fast. And again, that's the third Thursday of the month, not the normal fourth Thursday. In January and February, Llewellyn Falco will be talking. On February, he'll be talking with someone else. But they will be back on the fourth Thursday of the month. Same time, same bat time, same bat channel. And then I want to mention right now, we have 3 crafters here, at least 3, there are more. 3 that I know of right now that are currently unemployed, me, Paige, and Garrick. If you have any leads, suggestions, thoughts, please ping me, us. We're also available on the Seattle Crafter chat, Slack channel. Yeah, lots of ways to find us. And then finally, want to open it up to questions and thoughts.
Can we speak our thoughts, or do we need to type things?
Either.
Okay.
How about using the raise hand thing? There's quite a few people.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So yeah, I'm not used to Zoom meetings. I'll raise my hand.
Toby, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah. Shall I
Go
go ahead? Yeah, Steve, I was struck by the names of your methods kind of earlier on in the talk, and I didn't say it at the time, but for me, trying to come up with a very clear name from a method, specifically whether it's going to be trying to change something or whether it's giving you a result, it's a command or a query is what I do. And your method names earlier on seem to be like they were written as if they were doing a thing, like imperative, but they seem to be returning a status. And so I was hearing that, and I was also hearing like lots of kind of rules about like you should do this and you should do that. But the name thing, I got a bit fixated on that, naming the method. Of course, you then went on to say, well, let's just give it a kind of random name. But yeah, I was curious as to how you ended up with those names.
So some of those names were just me throwing something in there. They were an example from the code that I'd taken out and was just throwing some in there. There were some parts in there that were very, very much production code that I'd taken out and used. And so the naming could have been done by me, could have been done by someone else. Absolutely. When you're starting to talk about naming, like I said, and showing Arlo's 7 stages of naming, it's very complex. And I, most of the time, I go past nonsense because I can't keep nonsense in there. And I'll go with an honest name that is probably going to be pretty wordy. And then evolve it from there. My thought is naming's hard. It's one of the hardest things to do for me. And if I get something that's good enough, and I ask myself that a lot, is this name good enough? Okay, I'm done. Someone can evolve it once it evolves too. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, enough. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. All right, I see Peter.
Yeah, mine was, I think, riffing off of some of that. I've used delayed naming before, but I typically would resolve it away from nonsense to at least one of the stages of naming that drives it towards. But I was wondering about your thoughts. Sorry, I would resolve it to one of the more accurate levels of naming before check-in.
Mhm.
And so I would want to just explore the thoughts of how delayed in the process you allow things to go along. And there was a lot of discussion about to-dos. And so to me, I wasn't considering committing to trunk, for instance, something that wasn't of a certain degree of finish. I don't know. You want to riff on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, I would personally say I would not want to check in my pants. I would much prefer to. I would think that my refactor loop, since I'm talking, as a full XP developer, I'm talking feedback loops of minutes and under 10 minutes, preferably under 5 minutes. That my feedback loop for writing that test, figuring out what it needs, creating the methods, doing the quick renames, and throwing it in 5 minutes or less would be quick. And so what I'm saying is I'm assuming that pants would be changed to should be a better name, should do this when something or other for a test, or if you believe in the should naming, or at least a first pass is enabled, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that lines up with my thinking then, or my practice. So you start off, you're writing a test. The first thing you hit is you hit the method, but don't get hung up there. Just put a dummy name in, finish writing the test, circle back to the name.
Jay, do you have a question or an addition to naming?
I want to add to that. So I've introduced nonsense names to a lot of developers, and it gets negative reactions a lot. It's maybe the most controversial thing that I teach is to give something a nonsense name. And so I want to talk about how I became comfortable using nonsense names. What I noticed is in most of the legacy code that I see, there are names that are actively misleading. They lie about what the function does. And that's harmful. It means that when you read the caller, you see a function call, you don't actually know what your function does because you can't trust the names. And then you have to go read the other functions implementation to find out what it really does because that's not the name. And all this is terrible. It's expensive and it creates more bugs. And actively misleading names are worse than nonsense. So just switching from a name that lies to you to a name that's nonsense makes the code better. But the other thing that it does is it exposes the problem that's already there. It's candid. And we're uncomfortable with that. So like it was a bad name before, but we were able to not notice that it's bad. And now we have to notice that it's bad. The nonsense name is obviously bad. It's not just nonsense, it's obvious nonsense. And that makes us really uncomfortable. So anyway, that like my path through that was accepting that obvious nonsense is better than actively misleading, and just like saying, yes, I'm going to be okay with that being really in my face and candid, which is an improvement of what was there before.
Jay, what are specific protests that people have? What is their discomfort with using nonsense names?
Well, I mean, what they'll say is, you're not actually going to check that in, are you? Right. That's the way they phrase it.
It's unprofessional.
That's
not
what
professional.
I'm hearing, yeah. I
Don't
mean,
check in your pants.
When I worked at Finn, which is like a Belkin company that does plumbing stuff, I was working with a data science and analytics team. We had an entire algorithm that was really crucial to the company called Pants. It was just, that's what it was called. And that might have come from like, I don't know, these guys are like super mathy, statisticky, I don't know. No one bat an eyelid. So I guess it's very specific, to the culture of a company. I don't know.
But usually, like any word you pick is probably meaningful in some domain. So you don't have to pick a name that is not meaningful in your domain. Like I use applesauce, but if you're working for a fruit distribution company, that's probably not the right name to use. So you should adapt.
One of the things that I've heard against using simple or nonsense naming is, but I know what this button is going to do, or I already know what it does. And that I accept that. And I want to say, well, in those instances, then I guess you can. At the same time, I've found so much goodness from putting nonsense naming in and the intent revealing once you've implemented it. That even things that I thought I knew what it was going to be turn up not being it, and I'm renaming it anyway. I almost always hit Shift F5 or Shift F6 and rename something, or Control RR and rename it. That why not just leave it like that and rename it anyway?
Yeah, I like to do a 5-second rule because sometimes I think I do kind of know what it might be. And again, I have had people get messed up and like, what is pants doing? Like, say somebody joins the ensemble, partway through, we're like, oh, what is pants doing now? But yeah, it's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, applesauce. All right, move on.
Yep.
One place. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Karen.
Well, that's okay. It's my topic is a little off of the naming. So if you've got something to say about naming, go ahead, and then I'll throw out my random thought.
A place that the nonsense name comes up a lot, which I think is what Cody is thinking of, is you're reading a long method, you see a block. Hey, I don't know what this does, but it's a block. Let's extract method on it. That's an obvious thing to do. And then at that moment, okay, I'm halfway through extracting. I have to name this thing. And I don't want to block the capturing an insight, the insight being that there is a block. I don't want to, oh, that's a confusing way to say it. I don't want to inhibit our action of I see a block, turn it into a method while we go and pick up a better name. So hey, if you've got a good name, I'll take it, but I don't want to slow us down. So yeah, I'll use a time box. The best name you can come up with in that time box, as long as it's not actively misleading, I'm fine with it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make an observation that Cody and I both have fancy microphones, guitars in the background, and we're totally cool with calling things pants. I don't know.
Seems like we should be good friends.
Yeah, maybe.
Nice.
So one quick thing I wanted to call out. This is getting a little into language implementation specifics in terminology, and it was something that I had thrown out in chat, and I'm just kind of regurgitating it. Well, Steve, you probably missed it. Others might have caught it, but it was going into the comment that I made was throwing out, kind of putting forward as a hypothesis in terms of programming languages, the difference between an expression and a statement. And one of the things about complexity that you pointed out there was it seems to me that you are in a roundabout way getting into making a specific point about a statement, which is, kind of a unit of execution in a lot of languages, having as few expressions as possible, like things that produce values. So like the not operator on those Booleans, our example of, in that expression of evaluation, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different values that are being produced. And so by pulling that out, you're reducing the number of expressions or values being generated by the compiler or interpreter for a given statement. And of course, ironically, if you go and take a look at language features, the biggest sin of that is what a lot of OO purists, of course, love to use as a punching bag, which is the switch statement. Because by definition, that statement contains the most freaking possible number of expressions you can possibly wedge into a compiler operation. End of story. So just wanted to throw that out there, point that, and possibly Steve, leave that as your like food for thought as another thing to talk about, because I know you like to refine your talks.
Yep.
And pull from different places. So that's
absolutely.
all.
And it is, the simple code is one expression per line and minimal statements, the minimal number of expressions to do your statement, right? Yeah.
So I
Very,
really
very much
appreciated
so.
in your code example, Steve, where there was one expression that you retained because the concepts were related to one another. It was an and clause, something about button state, I forget. But the point is you can over decompose things as well and create more lines. So there's a balance to be had, but limiting your expression complexity, limiting your decision branching complexity, and balancing it out.
Yeah, that first example that Steve showed, that was the simple Boolean expression. I think me, him, and Garrick stared at for 30 minutes. Or over exaggerating, but we stared at it and we're like, I don't know what any of this means.
On that project, it felt like it was 30 minutes easily.
Yeah. It's like, we have tests. Okay, we can poke at it. It's like, I still don't know what it means. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Matt mentioned this very early on. I'm talking about simple things with this talk, but they're not so simple. It's simple is hard to do. And especially when you start tying into that a lot of the psychological nuances around, I have a title, I've got a principal title, I have this, and so why am I writing simple code? Part of it is I've had those titles, and I want to encourage people in those roles to help your developers less experienced to write simple code, because now you have the experience to do it and should feel comfortable with it too. It's great. Yeah. Other questions, thoughts, things that I poked the bear with. Else statements being evil. And Garrick, yes, switch statements are also evil.
Wait,
Could have
Jay
thrown
said
in-
something interesting about else statements. I don't remember what it was.
I said I'm comfortable with else if both branches are of equal significance.
Yeah. Could you explain that a little more? I'm kind of curious with that. I think I know
Yeah,
what you
so the counter example is the guard clause, where we're saying this method has a purpose. But by the way, we're not going to do the purpose if something. So that's just like, I want to get it out of the way, and then we can get on to the actual purpose. What they are of equal significance when I say, I'm either going to go this way or that way. And like the purpose of this method is to either do this thing or that thing.
Got it.
Toby, I saw you grab your microphone down for that. Are you thinking?
Well, no, I was just considering trying to get this microphone working and decided it would be a lot simpler to not try and get that microphone working right now. But I did have a thought, but it's back to naming. I've been doing a lot of improv comedy, studying it here on the island recently, and one of the things people do well, first I should say, last time I was on a call with Woody's, like some gathering of people months ago, Woody Zool, a mod programming guy, I said to him, like, there's loads of stuff in common with what you're doing with mod programming and what we do in improv. And he kind of recognized that, and like that is a thing apparently. But one of the things we do in improv is we'll often just use gibberish as a way of just focusing on our bodies and the way we're speaking, our intonation, just like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And it strikes me that like naming things with gibberish is just like using gibberish. It's just like focus on the thing you're doing. It doesn't matter what it's called. Blah, 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 blah. That's my thought.
Yeah.
I think maybe I want to call out this because I think Cody and I had a little bit of back and forth in the chat about to-dos.
Oh, yeah.
Which has probably resulted in me giving a talk in, I think it's going to be April, about how we use to-dos on a mob I was on for a couple of years. But I think that's like very much what you're talking about there, Toby, about like this really finessed separation of all of the decisions that you're making and deferring decisions, allowing yourself to tease those decisions apart and defer decisions that you don't need to make, don't want to make right now, so that you can make, like Jay talked about, like you're in the middle of doing a refactoring, you committed to the refactoring, but you don't know you don't want to have to decide what the name is yet. and just kind of like having the skill to see that as two separate decisions, and then the comfort to trust yourselves as a group that you will come back and name that thing better later. Like those are all things that kind of tie together. I think the skill of even being able to see them as separate, and then the faith in the group that you'll come back and deal with those deferred decisions. But I think it's really like, it's so valuable to be able to separate the decisions and know which ones are important to do now and which ones you can push off till later, because it allows you to keep flowing.
Yeah, without it, in a mob, you have like a multi-headed dragon all trying to go in a different direction. Oh, we need to think of the name now. No, we need to, extract this method now. Oh, yeah. So I definitely agree with that.
So that brings up a key point with, and Jay's sort of touched on it as well. A couple people have touched on it, is, the human brain is single-threaded. And the more we jump around into other things and think about, the more time we spend actually thinking about the name, even if it's 5 seconds, that is a pause in our flow. Whereas if we just automatically put in pants and go right into it, we're not interrupting flow as much. There's a default, it's pants, we're going in, we're doing this, and then we come back. And I think it was Matt Plavican that was talking about the TDD loop, and how TDD, the red-green refactor loop, doesn't seem to make sense because there are weird breaks in it and weird feedback loops, especially how he broke it down. The videos on our YouTube channel. And that sort of has me thinking about flow state and trying to maintain the flow state with as few interruptions as possible to optimize it. Garrick?
Little comment riffing off the thing about the brain being single-threaded. The thing that scared me in terms of reading some studies on learning was, it's not so much the single-threaded nature of it, of course, but it's the few number of registers that we have in terms of, if you'll pardon the abuse of the CPU terminology, we've really limited in terms of the number of things that we can hold rel short-term memory at one time. And I think they've clocked it at around 2 to 3, which is frightening when you think about people out there who advocate multitasking.
Yeah. Great discussion, great thought. Matt, you had a thought and then went away?
No, I was just playing with the raise hand because Toby was asking how to do it. It's under reactions in the menu at the bottom, in the toolbar.
Yep. You can tell the people that are on the new updated Mac if they do their thumbs like this, or a thumb up and something comes up.
Really? Oh.
Yeah.
My Mac is an Intel. That ain't happening.
Oh, yeah. So, Toby, you had a question or statement?
No, I was just, my question was, how do I raise my hand? Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. No, good questions, good thoughts. Happy to talk about more. Was trying to keep this talk relatively simple. Seems like, to use analogy that I talk about, the popcorn sounds like it stopped popping. Yeah. So again, thanks everyone for staying and doing some Q&A. Some great comments in chat. The video will be posted. Also, a couple reminders. One, Paige talking next month on the 3rd Thursday, how to make your teams fast. Agile Open Northwest will be in person this year in Portland. If you've never been to an open space conference, they're amazing. The theory behind them, an open space conference and open space technology, is to maximize hallway conversations. And it's a conference about hallway conversations. It is amazing. We get strong crafter turnout. I think Llewellyn and Woody Zool in the past have been attendees, regular attendees. We get other folks, obviously. Jay generally shows up. I show up, Paige, Garrick.
Ed's already bought a ticket.
Yep.
I think Chris Lucian is going to come. He's said
Awesome.
that- yeah. So we'll have
So-
There's a
quite
whole
few really good-
X-Peer cabal
Yes.
Right.
on the West Coast in a lot of cases that shows up.
And literally, we have plans. We meet the day ahead of time, and we sort of map out some strategies to really have fun and code and talk about important stuff. We go late into the night writing code. A lot of times we'll convene for dinner and then maybe go to someone's hotel room and ensemble program the night away. It's awesome.
I went
fantastic.
11 years ago and it was awesome. And it was the first time, it was down in Portland. And it's the first time I ever heard of buffalo wings. Still don't understand what they are, but it was great. When is the next gathering in Portland?
March 22nd.
No,
March 20th through 22nd. And
yes.
on top of that, it's relatively inexpensive. I think it's 300.
$345 for a 3-day conference, and it includes breakfast and lunch every day.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there you go. It's
Also,
all good stuff.
you know, some of us may show up and sabotage the Scrum discussions around estimates and things like that. Maybe that's been known to happen in the past.
Jelly bean discussion.
I'm not saying we intentionally maniacally plan to do so. He says he strokes the cat in his arms, but
Yeah. So very good times. Awesome. Well, thank you all for showing up. It was a good talk, and stay awesome, and let's keep having fun.
Thank you all.
thanks for
Thanks,
extending,
Everybody,
Steve.
thanks.